The Joe Rogan Experience.
Is dementia is it a genetic thing, or is it a function of atrophy? Is it a combination of those things?
It's a combination of those things. Certainly there's a genetic component. So maybe I will zoom out to start with and just think about, like, what is dementia? Dementia is the clinical diagnosis of losing so much cognitive function that you're not able to take care of yourself on a day-to-day basis. There are several different types of dementia. The most common is Alzheimer's disease. That's something like 60 to 80% of cases of dementia. The next most common is vascular dementia, something like 10 to 20%. And then there are others like frontotemporal dementia, Lewy body dementia, dementia you get with Parkinson's disease. But those first two, something like 70 to 90% of dementias, they are directly tied to lifestyle and the environment. And right now, it's estimated that somewhere between 45 and maybe even 70 or more % of dementias are preventable. And most of those fall into those two categories. There is a genetic component. So Alzheimer's disease has two broad types. There's early onset Alzheimer's disease. That's caused by a single mutation in a single gene, something like the amyloid precursor protein gene or one of the presenilin genes. Those people get Alzheimer's in their 30s to 50s. It's a very predictable and quite rapid decline sometimes. But that's maybe 1% of Alzheimer's. The vast majority, like when we think about Alzheimer's, we think about an age-related dementia. And this is much more related to the environment. So there is a genetic component. You might have heard of ApoE4.
Yeah.
So you can have 3 different flavors of ApoE, apolipoprotein E, 2, 3, and 4. You get 2 copies.
Which is the one that makes you more likely to get CTE? Is that 2?
Oh, no, so that's 4 as, that's 4 as well. Yeah, so 4 essentially has an effect of amplifying certain inflammatory effects in the brain. That's probably why it makes CTE worse. It makes it more likely for you to get CTE, because if you're getting repetitive impacts, repetitive injuries, then it sort of exacerbates or makes that inflammatory response worse. But when you think about that in terms of Alzheimer's, if you have 1 copy of ApoE4, your risk of Alzheimer's is increased by sort of 2 to 6 times. If you have 2 copies, it's 6 to 20 times, depending on how you look at it. But all the data suggest that ApoE4 is a risk multiplier, right? So it's not that if you have a copy of ApoE4, you're definitely going to get dementia. It's that in the setting, particularly of the modern environment, risks of dementia or risk factors for dementia are amplified, like excessive alcohol intake, physical inactivity, low quality diet. So that also means that if you have, if you then address those risk factors, you have greater benefit, right? Because you're offsetting some of that additional risk. So however you look at dementia from a genetic standpoint, and it can also be family history, right? If you have a family history of dementia, you have an increased risk of dementia. But a lot of what comes with family history is shared environment and shared lifestyle, right? You eat and sleep and move like your parents did. And so if they had a lifestyle that might increase their risk of dementia, you get that as well. So even if you do have an increased genetic risk, you can offset a large part of that through lifestyle and other environmental factors.
Okay, so for some people, there's an increased genetic risk, but do some people who do not have this increased genetic risk, do they still have a possibility of getting dementia just from atrophy or just from sedentary lifestyle, no stimulation whatsoever?
Yes. So the kind of the way we would say it is that not everybody who has ApoE4 gets Alzheimer's, and most people who have Alzheimer's do not have ApoE4. So absolutely.
Okay. So is it just like everything else, like your muscles atrophy, your bones weaken when you don't put load on them? Is that what it is?
Yeah. So that's like the core thesis of my book, right? It's called The Stimulated Mind. For that reason, I think that in the... And the title is slightly provocative because in the modern world, we are...
Hyperstimulated.
Overstimulated.
But with nonsense.
Exactly. So we're overstimulated and understimulated at the same time.
Right. We're getting a lot of input, but we're not doing any calculations. Yeah. We're not formulating new ideas. We're not being creative. We're not problem solving.
Exactly.
We're just being inundated with nonsense.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the function of any tissue in the body, right? You mentioned the muscles, the bones, the liver, the immune system. Their function is dependent on the stimulus you apply to them, right? And so the brain is exactly the same. And if you want functions and networks in the brain to perform well, you need to challenge them in order to enhance capacity in them.
Do you think you need to keep your liver working healthy by drinking every now and then?
So it's the example of, yes, if you drink a lot of alcohol, your liver gets better at metabolizing alcohol. So it proves the point, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the alcohol is there to keep your liver healthy. Well, probably not.
Didn't they used to do that with people that had, if they had lung problems, they would give them cigarettes?
Yeah.
Like people with asthma?
Yeah. And that didn't turn out so great. The theory was okay, but
I think they should have just been breathing heavy. That would have been a better application of that, right?
Yeah.
Because it's just like you don't want to your lungs aren't a filter to like torture you. Yeah. So when you started studying this, do you have someone close to you that has Alzheimer's, or is it just a field of study that you were interested in?
Yeah, there was two different things. One, I focused initially on the brain early in life, and then elite level cognitive performance in athletes. And you kind of see that these things sort of tie together, like what happens early in life, what happens during life affects what happens later in life. Mm-hmm. But I also had my grandfather died of dementia. He was an alcoholic, and he had a combination of alcohol-induced brain atrophy plus vascular dementia.
Oof. I really wonder about people today, and this is one of the reasons why I was so interested in this, because what we were just talking about before, that people are being oversaturated with nonsense but not stimulated in any way that challenges your mind.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a constant state today. And then on top of that, you've got a lot of people that are using AI throughout their day to solve all their problems where they don't think at all.
Yeah.
And there's been some studies on that show that it's a decrease in cognitive function. Like when they ask them to actually use their brain, the brain works less well than it did before they started. So you're not getting educated by ChatGPT.
No.
Or any of these. What you're doing is you're letting it think for you.
Absolutely. So this one, maybe one of the studies you're thinking of was a study they did at MIT. And they had students write essays. And they could either just write it using whatever they had in their head already, or using Google, or using an LLM. And what they showed was that as you increase the amount of like outside support you got, Google, and then I think it was ChatGPT, then there was less activity in the brain networks associated with actually doing the task, and students remembered less well afterwards. So, I mean, this isn't surprising.
Not at all.
You're not using your brain, therefore it doesn't engage in the task. But what's interesting is that they found a version. So, like some of the students who had previously written an essay just for themselves, then they asked them to go back and use ChatGPT on top. And what they found was that the final output was better. So the way that we can use these tools, rather than just asking it to do all the stuff for us, which is what most people are doing, and I think will cause skills and maybe even parts of the brain to atrophy because they're not being used, is we use them as orthotics. Like they can expand our capacities, right? You try writing it all first, and then you say, hey, what did I miss? What am I not thinking about?
Right.
And you can kind of build on it from there.
And that might perhaps actually stimulate your mind to think, why didn't I think of that?
Yeah.
Like next time I'm writing a paragraph, I'll consider these options.
Yeah, exactly. So you actually have to fully engage your brain in that process.
Yeah.
But then the end result might be better.
Well, it's just such uncharted territory for us.
Yeah.
Right? All this, especially social media. I mean, completely uncharted territory that people are staring at their hand for 8 hours a day. I mean, that's really what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're staring at your hand and you're hoping, usually unsuccessfully, to get something that really excites you and something that's really unique and changes your perspective on things. I mean, I think maybe when I was using social media every day, maybe once a day I would get something that I was really interested in that I would save. I'd go, oh, that's actually interesting. And I would think, okay, that'd be a good subject to bring up on the podcast. But the rest of the time, it was just horseshit.
Well, part of the algorithm, and this, I'm not an expert in training algorithms to do this, but part of the goal of the algorithm is that you don't get everything that is perfect or that immediately captures your attention up front, right? Mm-hmm. Because you want it to be random. And there's like method in the randomness that keeps you scrolling,
right?
Because eventually you'll get those small bumps that then keep you going. But what's particularly interesting about social media is it leverages the fact that we are social beings. So we prioritize information that is called the acronym is PRIME: prestigious, in-group, moral, and emotional. And this is even greater in social contexts, right? Because we are trying to learn about our social environment so that we can survive our group and be fitter. And so social media makes us think that we will get that information whilst at the same time offering us the exact opposite, which is essentially isolation. But it leverages that desire of the human brain to find this social information and this social connection whilst not giving us any of that.
Ugh. Also, without it getting any feedback from another human being while you're communicating ideas. So you could say the most horrible shit to people in a comment or a text message, and you don't think about it because it's like there's not a person there.
Yeah.
Not right in front of you.
Yeah. And
it's designed for it's like an anti-human device. Very weird.
But, I mean, if your goal is to capture attention, they're doing a great job of it.
Well, not just that, they're acquiring enormous wealth and also enormous influence over just all sorts of things, politics, economics.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the richest corporations in the world, they gather a thing that we never thought of was valuable, which is data.
Yeah.
I mean, when people first started using these things, when people first started using the internet, nobody really thought that data was going to be one of the biggest commodities in the world.
Yeah, but now, if they know what captures your attention and what you'll spend money on, and like it's a perfect way to get as much out of you as possible.
So the concept is future-proofing your brain. Mm-hmm. Like, what are the things that you think people should be doing to try to future-proof their brain, other than avoiding social media and avoiding a lot of this stuff that we're talking about here?
So I think, right, every tool has a possible use. So, like, for instance, social media. If you have crafted a social media that allows you to maintain connections that you wouldn't have otherwise, like the original version of Facebook as it existed 25 years ago, was just like posting pictures and you could like chat with some family members, right?
Right.
So if you use social media like that, and there are studies that show that if you're using online tools, including social media, and it increases communication and connection beyond what you would have had otherwise, that can be a net benefit. If it's all you use and it's replacing in-person human connection, then it's a net negative. So there can be ways that it could be beneficial. And, you know, if your Instagram feed is just like cute dogs running around in the snow, which is what most of mine is right now, right? That can be a nice 5-minute break in between cognitively demanding tasks.
Right.
That's fine. But when you think about future-proofing your brain, this idea that there is some unknowable future, right? We don't know what the future is going to look like. But if we want to exist in that future, we're going to need good processing speed, good decision-making skills, good working memory, good emotional and social skills, right? And so in order to maintain those, we need to challenge and stimulate them. So I think the most important thing most people can do is think about new, challenging, and often creative skills. And there's a lot of evidence for creative arts, music. What they do is they improve the function of networks in the brain that are at risk during the processes of aging, particularly because they're important for attention and social connection. And so if we really invest time in doing these things that we suck at and get better at them, we maintain these broad cognitive skills that we're going to need in the future regardless of what happens. And some of that is also personal. So the goal is to build as much cognitive capacity as possible, right? I have this idea of headroom, which is the difference between what you need on a day-to-day basis versus what you're truly capable of. It's the difference between, like, on a day-to-day basis, your legs need to be strong enough to, like, get you up off the toilet, right? But your maximum capacity is, like, what's your max back squat? The difference between those is your headroom. And then that gives you capacity to perform when you're injured or sick, or you need to, like, lift your car off your buddy because it got flipped in a car accident, like all those things. Like, when you need to draw on greater resources, you want those resources to be there. Because we are going to be stressed, sleep deprived, sick, and we still want our brains to function. So investing in, like, really challenging tasks and skills builds that capacity so that we have access to it when we need it.